Good morning. I'm Mark Allen with Gaper.io. I'm the director of not director of engineering, director of business development. That's a former title at Gaper. Um, and I'm here today with Mo Ezderman, the director of engineering at Thorn. And Mo and I did a podcast about 2 months ago, and I was really impressed by what Thorn is doing. So I decided, you know what, we got to get a webinar and get this guy out there to get his message out. So with that intro, Mo, take it away and tell us about Thorn and what you do.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, we met 2 months ago and we tried to do this conversation for a long time, and finally we have the chance to do it. So yeah, I'm director of engineering at Thorn. I joined Thorn. So Thorn, the mission of Thorn is we're building technology to detect and prevent child abuse materials from the internet. I joined Thorn a year and a half ago to this mission. Before that, I was focusing mostly on cybersecurity space, and that's where I got introduced to the dark web and all the bad stuff that happened on the dark web. And maybe that's why kind of like when I came and I realized I saw Thorn's mission, I was like, wow, that's perfect mission for me to join. After I know what's happening on the dark web, I want to kind of apply my skills to good. And I've been doing it for a year and a half, and I feel very fortunate to make an impact on that issue.
Yeah, well, and I think everybody can agree that anything that helps protect children should be a top priority of all societies. So I'm glad you could join us today, and hopefully your message gets out to as many people as we can get out to. So, and child sexual abuse is a broad problem. Can you explain to the audience what is the issue and what is the broad problem that Thorn aims to solve?
Yeah, the problem is very easy to explain. Unfortunately, we are right now we're like in urgent situation where child sexual abuse materials is circulating around the web on mass and catastrophic numbers, and children are at risk. That's the problem we are trying to solve. And at Thorn, we're building a cutting edge technology to defend children from sexual abuse and sex trafficking. Our strategy, we have like 3 pillars to our strategy. So the first pillar is the identification of the children. So we're building many tools that help law enforcement, to equip law enforcement with the right tool to identify the children and find them quickly. So that's like the first area that we focus on. The second area is equip platform with the tools to detect their own platform for such a material. So we're working with companies to go, every company that has like an upload button, it probably needs to kind of talk to Thorn because we have the right tool to detect this kind of material. The third pillar is empowering the public about this issue. So we're working with youth organization, with community, with influencer, and we try to educate young children and adults around this issue, how to avoid it, detect it, and things like that. So at Thorn, we 100 plus people, engineers, non-engineers that really dedicated and determined to solve this problem in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, that's great. As we've discussed, we have to be a little bit careful here because, you know, we can talk about what you're doing, but we really can't talk about how you're doing it. So, because we don't want we don't want the bad guys to figure out what you're doing. We got to stay one step ahead of them, correct?
That's correct. That's very true. I'm not going to say anything that it's not public.
Yes, that's great. So how widespread is this problem? Is it limited to the US or is it worldwide? And are there any particular countries where it's worse than others?
Right. So child sexual abuse, it's a not new issue. It's been around for like decades and centuries probably. And actually in the 90s, we were able to almost eliminate the problem altogether. And the reason why we were able to do that is that the materials, that was before the web became popular, the material was circulated through underground publications. If you like a consumer of these kind of materials, you like get your materials through the post office. And just by collaborating law enforcement and post office in the 90s, we were able to put almost a stop to this issue. With the rise of the internet, what we see right now, catastrophic numbers. We are seeing 15,000% increase in the last 15 years on the materials that's circulating on the web. We're seeing between 2017 to 2019, the numbers of reports to the reporting center triple. So the numbers are astronomical, and that's why we believe, like at Thorn, that the technology has to be in the center of everything. Like there's no way we can actually control the problem without like technology. And this is not because of the nature of where these materials get circulated. It's not a local problem of the US, it's a global problem that happen everywhere just because of the nature of like, you can be really anonymous, you can be in any physical location, and you can consume this material. So this is not just US, this is a pandemic that's across the globe.
And that, I mean, that's scary because I know, I could put together, I could put a server up on AWS in an hour and put whatever I want on it. So that, it is, I got to believe it's much easier than it was. And hopefully, hopefully we can bring an end to this. So, with the growing use of technology since the 90s, as you talk, because the internet really started in late 90s, early 2000, what steps have we taken as a society to protect our children from such harm?
Yeah, good question. And I'll give you the honest answer. Not enough. Mm-hmm. As a society, we don't do enough to prevent this problem. So there's a few reasons like that I think that we can do a lot more, and mm-hmm. why we need to be on top of the problem. Because the way the committing this crime is through the technology evolve in rapid pace, and perpetrators evolving as well. What we see today, we see like things that I used to see on the cybersecurity part, like with the hackers and malicious bots, they start operating in very similar fashion. So changing IPs, building like strange infrastructures that really hard to detect. They operating on the dark web, the privacy, like you cannot really, everything is anonymous there. So we definitely can do a lot more in technology. We need to invest in technology in organization like Thorn that that allow us to keep up with the change of technology. The second thing is government and law enforcement don't have the resources. So the government cannot keep up with the demand. We're talking about millions. We're talking about 30, 40 millions report every year. So the government cannot keep up with the report. Law enforcement don't have the resources to allocate to this problem. And again, that's why we believe at Thorn that the technology has to be a core function for this solution, because there's no way you can actually make a dent on the issue with technology.
And when you say 30 to 40 million a year are reported, that means there's other ones. I mean, I have to believe there's more that are not reported, correct?
100%.
Yeah, and that's really scary. And do you think part of the reason we really haven't done enough as a society is just the lack of knowledge of how widespread the problem is?
I think people are just trying to feel uncomfortable with the issue, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of companies kind of like, we don't have an issue with CSAM. CSAM is, I'm going to call CSAM is a child sexual abuse material. So CSAM, that's the industry name. A lot of companies don't believe they have CSAM on the platform. And I can tell you here that every company that coming to us to use our tools, they find CSAM on the platform. So it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just nobody's detecting it.
Wow. That's scary. So you brought up government. What are governments doing to help solve this issue in general, all the way from local government to, federal governments, of multiple countries.
Right. So the government has everything starts with the government. Everything government can do a lot. So the first thing that government needs to do across the globe is define what is that content, the legality of the content, something that's very trivial, but not all governments in the world define that this content is illegal. So the first step is what's legal and what's not. Once you define that this content is illegal, and once you find the content, the government needs to put law, infrastructure, what to do with this content. So, for example, in the US, we're like ahead of the game, thankfully. We have law that the content is illegal. We have organization like NCMEC, the National Center of Exploited Missing Children, that receive all the reports and start doing investigation, trying to find those children, trying to find the offenders. So we're in a good space in the US. However, on the other hand, government can actually inhibit the work of on detection on platforms. And that's what we see right now in the European Union. They have privacy law that actually preventing from company to detect their own platform for child pornography. And that's like around the privacy. You're probably familiar with the privacy law, and that's kind of like the line that humanity need to cross. Like, when is it serve the user, the privacy serve user, and when is it hurting the users? What are the lines? So that's like what we're working right now with the European Union, of like figure it out what it is, like how can we do work in Europe, and we believe we're in progress, and we believe we're going to get the resolution. But this is the problem. What we see in Europe right now, we see reduction in reports by 51% since this law established. And one thing to understand, like with this problem, if you, like any cybersecurity problem, if you don't have the detection, you're basically blind to the problem. Here, we are talking about a clue that can actually lead to multiple rescue of children and really have a breakthrough on cases. So I can't believe like how many contents out there that we don't know that probably can lead us to saving children and arrest the perpetrators.
Yeah, wow. And the law you're referring to was what's known as GDPR in Europe. And I've seen the law. It's well intentioned. It really is.
Right.
But I think society needs to draw a line somewhere. And I think when it comes to the protection of children, that's something that everyone can agree on. Maybe we can ease the GDPR laws for something like that. Would you agree?
Exactly. And again, like it's become like a tough. So what's is terrorism also part of it?
Right.
Where's the line? And that's where kind of like what Thorn does right now. They kind of like talking and they, like, have conversation with leaders. Where is the line? Right. Same story with encryption. Like, there's like a big push right now on encryption. This is obviously another risk that we have at Thorn. Like, once you encrypt devices, like you don't have any visibility. People can do anything they want on the devices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's strange because it is a well-intentioned law, and I understand it. And I mean, and Apple had to deal with this a few years back too. And I understand it. I think it's something society we have to figure out, right? And say this is where we're going to draw a line. There's a slippery slope, and we understand that. And boom, anything past this, but hopefully that will be resolved soon. So, So why don't we talk about Spotlight now? What technology is it? How does it work? And what success has it seen?
Yeah. So Spotlight. So as I mentioned before, we had like the 3 focus area. So the first focus area is identifying the children, and that's what Spotlight built for. So Spotlight is a product we build to equip law enforcement that detect child victim of sex trafficking. So it's like all around sex trafficking, and this is the challenge of sex trafficking. Right now, we have 200,000 sex ads get posted every day on the internet. From those sex ads, they have like the adult, which we're not interested in, but then they have like the children that we're very interested in. Those ads don't come with a birthday and images that they try to make them look older, so it's very hard to detect who's minor and who's not. So the problem is that law enforcement don't have the time, to groom through all the classified ads of escort ads and figure out who is who, and that's where Spotlight come to play. We built Spotlight in 2014, and in general, the way Spotlight works, we consume millions of data points, some of them public, some of them private, some of them recrawling, but we're taking a lot of data points. We run the data point and through machine learning and algorithm, and at the end of the day, the output is insight to law enforcement on who is the child, if we know where the child is, and we're kind of prioritizing for the law enforcement what's the most important case for them. So that's how Spotlight works. Since Spotlight launch, we identified 20,000 children, and on average, we identify 8 kids a day, which is phenomenal. I'm so proud of that team and these numbers, and we're able to actually reduce the time for law enforcement by 55%. So huge impact on Spotlight, what Spotlight can do in the sex trafficking and identification effort.
And is Spotlight something a municipality's police department would sign up for, or how does that work?
Right. So in the US, all law enforcement in the US, 50 states and Canada are using this tool. So they're like logging in every day, getting the reports, trying to figure it out. So in the US, using it heavily. Outside of the US, I don't think outside we have like any law enforcement outside of the US that using this tool. Right now, it's the US and Canada.
Wow, interesting. So, and you also have a product called Safer. Can you elaborate on that? What it is and what does it do, and how successful has that been?
Yeah, so Safer, like we're tackling the second pillar I was talking about, equipping platform with the right tool to detect CSAM on the platform. So Safer launched 2018, and the way, and here is the problem that Safer starts with. So a lot of companies has some sort of like detection tools. Not a lot of companies. I'm saying like the big company has detection tools that every time user upload content, it's going through like some moderation, like AI moderation, and detect like. But this tool detect a lot of things. It's not just child abuse materials, it detect other things. But then there's a lot of companies, most of the companies don't have the resources to build such a tool. It's a very expensive tool. I'm going to explain in a second why is it so hard to build this kind of tool. So this is the problem. There's companies that don't have the tools that they need to implement Safer, and I wish all companies come and start using Safer. And even the big companies, like don't have the expertise to really address the problem, right? There's a lot of commercial, technology, facial recognition and like sounds, but those are commercial. Those for the mass use. They're great technology, but they're for the mass use. They don't work really well on children. They don't work really well on children of color. So we don't use this kind of technology. We are writing our own technology because the commercial technology is not really serving us very well. So that's why like a lot of the big customers, that even though they have like internal tools, they're using Safer to detect and secure the platform. Right now, Safer has 15 customers. We Since Safer launch, we identify 150,000 child sexual abuse materials. On average, we identify 200 and something, 215, I think, on average, files that could be like images and video. And this is like what I think, like, like I want to kind of like talk about like a kind of a case studies, like one of our clients, like a big client, I can mention the Flickr, the one of our first client that came to us 2018, and he came to us, they're like, most of the clients coming like that, they're like, we don't think we have anything, but can we just use Safer to detect our platform? And Safer were able to detect in the first hour, the first CSAM on Flickr. So we help them. This tool is like detect, remove, and report. So this tool does like the whole thing. But Flickr didn't stop there. They conduct their own investigation. They try to look into like, okay, who's that profile of that person? What is it linking? They did like internal investigation, and they're able to get to 21 more children that get abused on Flickr, and they, with law enforcement, they were able to arrest the offender. So that's why when I'm saying like we need just one positive detection that can lead to, make a huge impact on the problem. Another thing is the way Safer, just talk a little bit about like how Safer works. A content get uploaded. We basically compare the content to another, we hashing the content, hashing meaning take an image, create and hash, basically it's a unique identifier of that image, and try to compare this hash with 6 million hashes that we currently have in the database of known CSAM. Now, here's the problem and here's the challenge. As I mentioned, the penetrators, tech savvies, when you create this hash, if you remove few pixels from the hash, it's completely different hash. Mm-hmm. If you flip the picture, it's a completely different hash. If you put borders, if you change the colors, and they know that and they do that, and that's how they try to get by, other system. But Safer, at Safer, we develop a technology that you can't do that. Like we're able to actually matching hashes, even if you change things in the. And the reason why I think like why I want like everybody to use Safer, because that 6 million hashes are all coming from platform, from companies that using Safer that start sharing those hashes. So we want to increase the number of hashes on this on our platform, and that's going to lead to more kids, more arrests, and things like that.
Wow, that's fascinating how you're doing that. I actually, I know technology. I didn't know you could do that. So, and we won't go into the details how you do it. So. But interesting, the thing that I found is you said you have 15 customers using this. I mean, I would hope, a month from now you have 1,500 companies using this. I mean, the more companies that sign up, the better the product will be, right?
Exactly. It's a number game. More detection gonna lead. If all companies going to use Safer, we're probably going to get really close to solving this problem.
Wow.
Like they're operating operating on the wild web. They have like a lot of them operating on dark web, which is a different problem. Mm-hmm. But the majority of them, like, operating on the wild web.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully there's some CEOs and CIOs of some large companies watching this, and they contact you shortly after this, right?
So, yeah.
So talking about big companies, what are the big tech companies doing about this? And I won't go over the names. Everyone knows the names of the big ones. Are they doing anything to help in this?
Yeah, so we see the trend is that they start doing a lot of things. Like tech company have the awareness of, they want to make sure that they're aware of the issue. They want to make sure the platform is clean. So the last year we see increasing report from those companies by 28%. So we do the big one doing more than the smaller one. Mm-hmm. And I think like my hope is like that the smaller ones going to start like using like safer, or start reporting, or build their own technology, but start reporting on this content. So we see a change in the last few years that, you know, companies more and more kind of proactively trying to detect the content. There's big risk for them, you know, besides it solving the problem. They have big integrity risk
Right.
of the users. So they, you know, they're doing more now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know. And hopefully they continue to do more, and hopefully they work with Thorn to help solve this problem. And so that brings me to the, you know, our next question is, where do you see Thorn going in the future? I mean, we're just, you know, this problem is still out there. So what do you think the next 5-10 years holds for Thorn?
So one thing for sure, it's like the mission is going to stay the same. Like we are going to eliminate child sexual abuse from the internet in the next 5 to 10 years. The mission is not going to change. What's going to change is the technology. So technology evolve. We need to be ahead of the game. We need to be ahead of the curve. We need to be ahead of the penetrators. So as we're learning how they're operating and new technology coming in, so one thing is how penetrators operate, and try to understand how they're trying to do the things and build technology around it. But also start using new technologies that are going to come in the future. So a lot of investment in technology and how to apply the new technology to solve the problem. So that's where our focus is going to be, and you know that's what we're doing like every day. We actually this week we have we're doing a lot of those. We're having hackathon. We used to do a public hackathon as well, with people kind of like coming and try to solve the problem. But with COVID, things different. But this week we're doing a hackathon with, you know, I think like creativity and innovation, that's how you solve the problem. So hackathon is part of it. So a lot of investment in technology in the future, and also in public education. That's another area that we are going to invest.
Very cool. And are you actually, do you have openings? Are you hiring people now currently?
Yeah, so we're growing a lot. So right now we're 100 plus. We have, if anybody interested, we have job description, thorn.org, a lot of opening position, engineering, non-engineering. So I'll be happy to speak if anybody interested from the audience and just want to hear more about like how we're doing things, technology. I'd be happy to kind of like talk to anyone. Yeah. So
Well, that's good. And you know, it's interesting because I talk to a lot of younger people, you know, fresh out of college and through Gaper, and they all seem to want to make a difference. So I would encourage anybody that wants to make a difference, because a lot of you do, this would be a good opportunity for you. Go and apply it at Thorn, and you would truly make a difference in, you know, people's lives out there. So we're going to finish with one last question. What can normal people like myself and my family and friends do to help curb this problem?
yeah, so there are many things everyone can do. So the first thing, talk about it and get educated about the issue. Now, this is like a very dark issue, right? Like you need to have some courage to jump in and get into the story of victim. But if anybody really interested, I think that's the first step, is understanding what life of a victim looks like. There's a lot of, I'll be happy, people can reach out. I can refer it to like videos of victims, of like talking about what is to be like child sexual abuse, and how this problem kind of following you throughout life, right? Like it's not just, that's one of the kind of the issue of doing it on the web. The content is there forever. So the victims growing up, but you always know that they have content out there around them. So the first thing is like educate and talk to your friend, talk about the issue, and keep learning. So we have also like a lot of research that we do at Thorn. Thorn.org is a lot of research. You can subscribe, I think, to like some email list that you can get more research around the issue. Another thing that people can do is be advocates in terms of find who's your representative in your area that's responsible maybe for those issues. So right now, as I mentioned before, the privacy laws are going to make or break this issue. So I encourage whoever wants to make an issue, pick up the phone, find who is your representative, ask them if they're familiar with the issue, and explain them about the privacy issue that we're facing, I think humanity facing, and maybe he can be advocate for us. Uh, Another thing that people can do is, this is a global problem, but there are a lot of local organization that kind of treating sex trafficking victim, child abuse. So you can find, again, Thorn can help with that, finding local organization that you can, maybe people can volunteers and make a difference there. And obviously another area is funding, like we are nonprofits. So funding, it's always a good way to kind of support Thorn. You can also go to thorn.com, thorn.org, and see how you can do that, and bring your own skill to the mission, right? That's like hiring. We have a lot of open heads. If you think there is a skill that you can provide, and even if there is not open position, a lot of our full-time employee really got into the mission by volunteering. So they start as a volunteer, as a data science or like engineer or whatever, and then roll into kind of more full-time employees. So that's another issue, another thing we can do. And last, as a parent, talk to your children. Something that I'm very close to the problem, so I'm doing it a lot. I have like young children, 10 and 12. Obviously, you can't talk to them about the specific of the problem, but that they know that the internet is the risk of the internet, and be also curious with what they do and what their friends do, and the way I'm like find that really helpful is like really being curious in their life and ask them, oh, like, what your friends doing and how you guys communicating, what do you do, talking about nudes, for teenager on the internet and the implication of that. So those are the way that anybody can help with the mission. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I my kids were that age right around when the internet was starting. So I didn't have to. I mean, I did a little bit when they got to be teenagers, because it was just I had to explain to them, hey, this is a great tool, but you got to be careful too. And
Right.
now, hopefully, maybe they'll join you and help you in the cause. They both have engineering degrees.
Right there.
I will be calling them later.
Yeah, I'll be happy to talk to anybody that's interested in the mission.
Yeah, and then one thing we talked about was remote work. I know you're based in New York. Are you hiring in New York? Or are you hiring all over the world?
We are a remote organization by choice before COVID. So we're going to be remote after COVID also. So I'm in New York, but we are, I think, like at this point, like 25 states at this point. Also in Canada, we have some employees. So location is not a problem. Like, we know how to deal with location and time zones.
Well, good. That's great. Well, Mo, I really want to thank you for your time today. Again, I met you about 2 months ago. I was really impressed with what Thorn is doing. It's good to know that there's smart, dedicated people like yourself and your team that are tackling a really important problem that society has to tackle. And I'd like to thank you for society. I mean, I think it's great what you're doing, and hopefully this brings some awareness to what's going on out there.
Yeah, thank you for having me and giving me this platform to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Have a great day and a great weekend.
You too, Mark. Thank
Bye.
you.